Well, let's go now and speak with a member of Knesset for the ruling Likud party, Danon. He's also a former Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, joining us this evening from Tel Aviv. Danny, let's just start with the news that came out this evening. Yehudit Weiss, one of the hostages, was apparently discovered dead, killed, murdered, as was the IDF says, in the Gaza Strip. Also, your thoughts on the fact that this may well certainly increases pressure on the government, perhaps, from the families, the loved ones of those hostages, to perhaps reach a hostage deal. And the question is whether there should be certain red lines for the government of what kind of, without getting into too much of the detail, the specifics, but certain red lines that should be set if, in terms of any kind of deal to free the hostages in Gaza.
So, Caleb, I think what we saw today is another example of what's happening in the hospital in Gaza, in Shifa Hospital. You know, people around the world are calling me, so what have you found already there? And unfortunately, we found a body of an elderly Israeli citizen who was kidnapped from Israel. And you ask yourself what she was doing there, why they left her body near the hospital, and it shows us with whom we are dealing. So with all due respect to the criticism, we will operate everywhere, including hospitals, in order to bring back the hostages, in order to find the terrorists who committed those horrible crimes. And we are patient. We are moving slowly, and we'll continue with that. Regarding the hostages, you know, it's very complicated. I met many families during the week, and I told them that we are committed to bring them back, but we are dealing with a player that you cannot look for logic on his side. So even when we speak about a tentative agreement or exchange of prisoners for hostages, you never know what they will do in the last minute. And that's exactly what happened before we started the ground operation. We had some kind of negotiations, but it didn't go anywhere. So we are very cautious with promises, but I can tell you that the government is committed to do everything we can to bring the boys and girls back home.
All right. Well, you talked about international reaction and pressure. You are a former ambassador to the UN. The UN Security Council finally did pass a resolution, one that did not call for a demand to cease fire on Israel, but it did not condemn at all Hamas's actions or deal with that. The U.S. chose to abstain on that resolution, along, ironically, with Russia. I want to get your reaction to that resolution, along with the abstention of the United States there.
Well, you know, we care less today about UN resolutions. We care more about winning the war and bringing back the hostages. But I agree with you. You know, I think the fact that the U.S. abstained, I think it was a mistake. We expect more from our allies. And when you look at the language of the resolution, like you mentioned, Carl, you know, no condemnation for the atrocities of Hamas, for what they did to our people, the kidnapping, the rapes, you know, horrible things, and they chose to ignore it. So it's shameful. But, you know, today the Israelis, we don't pay attention to the UN now. We are in a war of survival. We realize it's either us or them, the enemy, and we are determined to go all the way. With all due respect, maybe the UN will do something for the hostages. You know, we speak about international organizations. Where is the Red Cross? How come they haven't visited even one Israeli hostages? They couldn't visit him so far.
Right. Now, you spoke about pressure from outside on the U.S. There is also question, especially now that it looks like the battle is going to have to be taken in the south of Gaza, and we're talking about a lengthy operation. There have been reports here in the Hebrew press, the Israeli press, of concern among some members of the government. Your name was one of those mentioned, and other members, perhaps, of the Likud, concerned about the determination of the government to carry this through, this operation through to a finish, to its goal of completely eliminating Hamas, something that wasn't done in previous operations conducted under governments by Prime Minister Netanyahu. Is there that concern among certain members of the government or in the parliament of the government's willingness to carry through this operation to its end-stated goals?
I'm very direct on this issue. We support the government, we support the Prime Minister, and we think the unity government is essential today in Israel. But they have only one mandate. The mandate is to win the war. Nothing else, nothing less. They cannot play around it. with all due respect to the pressure that will come, to the UN, to the EU, the people of Israel expect full victory. And full victory, it means that you eradicate Hamas from north to south, including all the communities, all the villages, demilitarization of the Gaza Strip. That is full victory. So I think today, not only the Likud, but in the Knesset and in the Israeli public, no one will accept any compromise that will leave Hamas, even in a small part in Gaza.
Right. I'm sure you've seen the polls that came out on the Israeli news channels tonight, and I'm sure you're not going to respond to those directly. But they do indicate somewhat of a loss of confidence in both your party and Prime Minister Netanyahu. I have to say, it is not unknown. I mean, I'm not talking politics here. I'm talking about public confidence in a government in a time of wartime. There is historical precedence. Great Britain, both in World War I and World War II, did replace a prime minister during wartime. I just want to see if you have any kind of response to that issue. And again, I repeat, and not politics, but the confidence of the public in the government conducting the war.
So I think it's a mistake to have such a discussion. I think we should support the prime minister, support the government. After we finish the war and we defeat Hamas, then it's legitimate to raise all questions, to have all political debates, to speak about who is to be blamed. But now we shouldn't give Hamas the feeling that they actually cause any political disturbance in Israel. We have no left and right today. We are united. You know, our boys are fighting now in Gaza. They sit in the same tank, left wing, right wings, religious, seculars. So it's not time for politics, it's time for unity. And I think the leader of the opposition, Mr. Lapid, made a mistake by actually raising the idea of replacing the prime minister during the war. I think now it's not the time even to discuss such an idea.
All right, well, let me just ask you now, 6 weeks into it, at a time when Israel, when the IDF says it has control of the north of Gaza, to start talking about what people call the day after, even an interim arrangement. We heard President Biden, who was still supporting Israel's operation, spoke strongly against Hamas the other day in San Francisco, but was very direct in saying, expressing his support for a two-state solution at a time when we're not really hearing from the government what are their plans, what are the intentions for the governance of the Gaza Strip, not only just after the war, but even during this, because somebody's going to have to take care of civil issues, civil matters for that population in the areas that Israel is now taking control of.
So first, before we speak about the day after, let's speak about tomorrow.
Okay.
We still have to deal with Hamas in the center of Gaza and southern of Gaza. So we haven't finished. We only begin the war. We have a lot of tasks to take care of. Once we finish with the eradication of Hamas, I can give you the main guidelines. We will have to operate in terms of security everywhere in the Gaza Strip. We have no intention to run the civilian life of Gaza. I think the international community, including regional partners from the region, they should be the one coming and receiving some kind of a mandate to operate in Gaza. But now I'm focused more on the war rather than the day after.
All right. That's certainly clear. Ambassador Danon Danny, member of the Likud in the Knesset. Thank you for joining us on I-24 News.
Thank you very much.